All right, let's take a look at example 2 for 1.2.3. In sporting tournaments, teams are eliminated after they lose. We're assuming this is like a single elimination tournament. You lose, you're done, you go home. The number of teams in the tournament then decreases by half with each round. If there are 16 teams left after 3 rounds, how many teams started out the tournament? So again, we're taking half of the teams each time. So we're multiplying by 1/2. So again, we're doing repeated multiplication, right? So we're repeating which means this is going to be exponential. Okay, so we're going to go back to that same basic setup here of y equals a times b. And I would normally use x here, but we are going to be, and I'm going to use x this time instead of t, because instead of an amount of time that we're waiting for, we have a certain number of rounds that we're going through. So x is your number of rounds. So again, a in this case is your starting teams, the starting amount of teams. B is the rate at which you're losing the teams. So rate of and then X is the number of rounds. And I didn't mention on the last one, but I guess I should. What is the Y in this case? Well, that's the teams left. In the last example, the Y value would have been the total number of mice after a certain amount of time. Okay, so the teams left. All right, so now let's see what they actually gave us in the problem to work with. All right, it says teams are eliminated after they lose. The number of teams in the tournament then decreases by 1/2. So there we go. We're going down. And remember, with exponential functions, you should have done some exponent rules in 8th grade. But if you have a b value that is between 0 and 1, that's going to be exponential decay. Right, that means your overall value is going to be decreasing over time or per round or whatever. If b is greater than 1, that's going to be growth, exponential growth. It's going to grow over time. The numbers are going to get bigger. That's pretty much all we're going to work with for this class right now, is dealing with growth and decay. We're not going to deal with any negatives here, so we're only going to be focused on positive numbers. And we want to go with decay on this one because we know that they're decreasing by 1/2. So our b value is between 0 and 1. It's 1/2. So let's start filling in the pieces. So I know that my b value is 1/2, and that comes from this statement right here with each round. Okay. If there are 16 teams left, wait a minute. Is that how many teams we started with? No, that's how many teams we have left after 3 rounds. So they went ahead and gave me my y value. They went ahead and gave me my piece over here that's by itself. And they also gave me that it was after 3 rounds. So that's my x, the number of rounds. Now they want to know how many teams started out. Started out. That's the same thing as initial, right? The starting amount is the initial value. So I actually don't know my a in this problem. So what I want to figure out is that a value. So how do I go about doing that? Well, to find that a value, I simply need to clean up the right side and solve for the variable that we're missing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and do 1/2 to the 3rd power, which again, the way exponents work, that means 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2. You can write it out like that if you need to. A times 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2, 3 times. Okay. Or if you're using your calculator, you have your calculator available to you, you can just do it to the 3rd power. Make sure you put parentheses around 1/2 because you don't just want to do 1 to the 3rd power divided by 2. You want to do 1 divided by 2 raised to the 3rd power. Okay, it makes a huge difference. All right, so what we end up with is 16 equals a times 1/8 because we multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators. So now I need to get rid of that 1/8. Now, the way I do getting rid of fractions and the way you do it could be different. If you're using a calculator, you can divide by 1/8. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal, which is 8/1. Okay? It's the same thing as dividing by 1/8, multiplying by 8/1. What that does for me is that changes this to 8/8. The 8's cancel, right? And they go away, leaving me with just 1. So I get A equals, and then 16 times 8 is 128. So the tournament started with 128 teams. Okay? Now I know what you may be saying, but that's growth, Mr. Reynolds. It went from 16 to 20. No, remember, guys, it started with 128, and after 3 rounds, there were only 16 teams left. So it is decay. Over time, or as the rounds go by, you are losing teams, but you're having to work backwards in this problem to get back to your starting point. Okay, that's the difference. It's still decay. All right, if you need more examples of decay, come talk to me.